Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we're chatting about foster care, adoption, and adoption with the LGBTQ plus communities. I mean, I wanted to make sure I got them all right, so I wrote them down because sometimes one gets left out. So with me today is Lane, who is a member of all those communities. Correct, Lane?
Right. Well, I'm so glad to be here. I'm really excited about this.
So tell us a little about yourself before we get into your book and the reason why behind the book and everything.
Okay. So my name is Lane Igoudin, and I'm going to talk about my book, but I'm going to talk really more about the story behind the book, which is the story of my husband and my adoption of 2 kids from Los Angeles County foster care. So about that experience, what it meant. So I hope we'll kind of dig deep into that. This is my first book, but I teach English. I teach English and linguistics at Los Angeles City College. I've been there almost 20 years. And what's interesting is that my transition from my previous occupation into teaching was occurring at the same time as adoption. So that's also in the book too, a little bit in the background. In any case, that's I'm really glad to be here.
So what made you decide to do the adoption through the foster care system route?
Right. So when we went into the process, which was in the early 2000s, there were multiple ways of building a family which were available to gay men, you know, and so at the time we were looking at surrogacy, private adoption, international adoption, and foster adoption. And each of them is a very different route. But we could have gone the surrogacy route. Both of us are working. It was just a double income, no kids type of family. We could, but it wasn't so important to us that our kids would be biologically related to us, really. And then a private adoption, which is arranged with a parent who is willing to usually to have their baby adopted at birth. Mm-hmm. That was also available. And there are some countries which allowed international adoptions by single, usually it would have been as single men. But then we live in Long Beach, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. I work in Los Angeles. We're part of Los Angeles County, and Los Angeles County has the largest foster care system in the United States. It did 20 years ago. It still does. Mm-hmm. And at the time we went into the process, there were between 30 and 35,000 kids in the system. And we strongly felt that, we thought, like, why should we travel to some other country or create our own children or just have something else when there are children probably like within a quarter of a mile from here that need a home. So we kind of went into the process with, being very, very, I would say, kind of like wanting to heal the world in a way, but also a little naive, so all of that came, was part of our decision. So we decided we wanted to take, we were planning to adopt two kids under the age of 5, hopefully girls, The reason is that I helped to raise my younger sister, who was about 10 years younger than me. And so this was something I was familiar with, and we felt we could sort of like connect on the emotional level maybe a bit more. So these were our preferences, and that was just about it.
So, but there is so many, you opened my eyes to the adoption through foster care system, because honestly, I did not realize how many hoops that the foster parents have to jump through. And it was required more for the foster parents than for the birth parents, correct?
Well, nobody takes takes an exam or gets a license to be a birth parent, right? So you have kids and you have kids, right? So that's that. to become a foster parent, you have to go through a pretty extensive certification process, of which there's a home study part where they may want to make sure there's enough space, the space is safe in your home. But there's also, we're talking about like fingerprinting and live scanning, kind of making sure that you yourself is a safe adult for the child to be with. Mm-hmm. And there are many questions, so you get screened, even in a county which really needs as many foster homes as possible. Mm-hmm. It was I would say the process probably took us about between 4 and 6 months. Oh, and then you also have to complete a certain number of parenting education courses hours. I think in our case, it might have been something like over 30 hours, if I remember correctly. So yeah, it was a process. On the other side, and so that sounds as a pretty kind of, well, why do I need to do this? On the other side, because, if you look at it from a different perspective, as a foster adoptive parent, you can actually sort of screen to some degree the kids that you're going to foster and hopefully raise as your own later on. So you can, you fill out questionnaires for the ages, number of, the sibling set, race, ethnicity, medical condition, all those things go into the file. And so with that, you get into the pipeline, and then you start getting calls, hopefully.
Yeah, but I was talking about when, like, for instance, the birth mom for both your girls, because they're natural siblings, but having to jump through hoops to try to accommodate her time instead of they're accommodating your time, because you were working a full-time job, your husband was working a full-time job, and you having to jump through those hoops, whereas basically she could come and go basically as she pleased, pretty much.
It was exactly the way you describe it. And in the whole setup, and again, I don't want to speak for the whole country, North Carolina where you are, but I'm definitely familiar with the way it is in Southern California, here in Los Angeles. Foster adoptive parents, I would say, are probably at the bottom of the pecking order. When it comes to needs and things like that. The system was and still is primarily concerned about reunifying kids with their biological families, with their natural parents. And of course, it makes sense. So their needs are definitely taken into consideration first and foremost. And our needs, we have to comply, or if we're really, egregious about it, we might lose the kids that we're fostering, because, the county will say, hey, you're supposed to do all this, you're not doing that. Maybe you can find a better home for these kids.
Yeah.
So,
and
we complied, the best we could.
Yeah. I know in your book, you were talking about how it took a toll on you emotionally, and, because you became so wound up so tight, and you were walking on eggshells.
Right. And just to go back for a second to your previous question, yes, we both worked full time, but at the time I was going through a career transition. I was working as a public affairs officer with a business school at a university, and I was graduating from grad school to teach English, basically. And so it was actually part of the whole setup, because I quit that job when I had enough classes to teach, exactly so I could teach early morning and late night courses, or I would say evening courses and early morning courses, so I can keep the middle of the day open to all these visits and everything else that went on. For months and months, we had up to 4 visits a week, and that we're talking about all the way across the county. So for that to happen, and that's very well described in the book, one of us probably would have had to either quit the job, or in my case, I would teach a morning class, then go to daycare, pick up the kids, drive here, drive there, come back, and then, swallow a sandwich, and I'm off to teach another class. That's how it was. And emotionally, you said, you asked me about emotionally. Yeah, it took a huge toll. Thankfully, I was a little younger than I am now. I was in my mid-30s, so I had a lot more energy to deal with it. but still, it wasn't so much the physical part of it. And you have to also realize, I mean, we were raising these kids, just the two of us, a newborn and a roughly 2-year-old. So there's that, there's working full time, and there's the whole, but it was really the emotional toll from the process, from the fear and uncertainty as to what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen to us as a family, and feeling completely powerless in the process.
And I do want to add that 30 minutes to most people, like in North Carolina, 30 minutes away is not a big deal. But in LA, 30 minutes away can take you a while to get there.
Sorry, 30 miles away.
30 miles away.
30 miles away.
But it still could take you
a
bit to get there
yeah.
with the traffic.
Yep.
So we need to take a brief commercial break, but when we come back, I want you to read part of your book.
Thank you.
People welcomed me, and they knew the pain of the journey that we'd been on because they'd been there too.
Other Parents Like Me is an online community, peer-led, for parents with kids struggling with mental health and or substances.
It's a space that's safe. Feels like I can actually share what's going on.
We offer 15 daily support groups per week and live speaker talks on Thursdays, as well as a monthly expert panel.
We also have a resource hub that has a toolkit. This includes over 1,000 articles, podcasts. There's a glossary with the most recent and relevant terms. And we have a directory that's been vetted.
The overwhelming feeling when we're sitting in a meeting and I'm telling my story and I see others shaking their head, tears falling, they understand this roller coaster and they're along for the ride.
And we are back with Lane, who wrote the book, A Family Maybe, and Lane is going to read part of this book.
Thank you. Actually, it's the first chapter from my book. And what's interesting about it is that I'm giving this interview sitting on a couch in our living room, and this is exactly where it takes place, or part of it takes place there. So I guess I'll start.
All right.
The chapter is called Curbside Delivery, and it takes place in 2006.
Okay.
It was on a hot, early summer afternoon, just before the breezes would begin blowing inland from the ocean, that Jonathan shot me an irritated sideways glance. Where is she? Didn't she say early in the morning? That was hours ago. What's taking her so long? A 6'3" athlete with the face of the Bridgerton lead, my partner John was lining up daisy-patterned onesies and burp cloths by the bassinet in the baby room. I had heard him vacuuming this room earlier, and before that, tidying up the crib and the toys in the green bedroom upstairs. Patience, dear, I sighed. Give her just a few more minutes. She should be on her way. Like John, I was trying to control my anxiety by being useful, yet I couldn't help rushing to the window every time I heard a car drive by. Jackie Willis, our designated LA County social worker, was neither here nor responding to my calls. Did the county change its mind? Did they release the baby to her mother, Jenna? We'd been living with this uncertainty for months. Jenna was due around Memorial Day, but with office closures and Jackie out on medical leave, the baby could have gone to the wrong home. But that Memorial Day, I received a call from Babushka, my Russian-speaking grandmother. Mazel tov, she announced. Your Jenna gave birth today. How on earth do you know that? I scoffed at her. We've heard nothing from the county. I just know, she said in her raspy, confident voice. Так что не волнуйся, сам увидишь. Don't worry, you'll see it for yourself. I relayed her announcement to John, and he chuckled at my dear 84-year-old grandma, our closest ally in the family. I chuckled too, but deep down I felt even more anxious. What if she was right? I had no experience raising a newborn, nor did John, zero. We'd been trained and certified, but that was all just textbook learning. Were we really about to become caretakers of a tiny, fragile life, 100%, 24/7? What were we getting ourselves into? 3 days later, a social worker called from the hospital with the news that the baby had been born on Memorial Day at noon, just as Babushka had said, but couldn't be released yet. She had sepsis, a potentially fatal blood infection, likely from the cesarean, and had to be put on medication. Other arrangements had already been made by Jackie's Department of Children and Family Services. The newborn would not be released to her mother. Instead, she would be detained, that is, put in the court's protective custody and placed with us as an emergency foster home. The baby would remain with us as her long-term parents, while Jenna would be given an opportunity and resources to reunify with her child. Sepsis made it easier for the county to carry out its plan. Jenna recovered quickly and was discharged home to continue, as we were told, with her drug rehab and counseling. Meanwhile, the baby was improving on antibiotics, while the court, on the county's request, formally detained her. But Jenna came back to breastfeed, and the nurse leaked out the secret. Devastated and desperate, Jenna refused to leave, pleading with the staff to let her take her baby home. On June 6th, the phone rang. "I'm on my way to the hospital," Jackie yelled over the freeway hum in the background. "Jenna still there?" "Oh, yes," she said, "still there, camped out, refusing to leave. She knows I'm coming to get the baby." Poor Jenna. I couldn't imagine how she would feel or what she would do once Jackie got there. My chest tightened, and it was becoming real for us, too. After all these months, really real. Our life was going to split into before and after. At 4:30 p.m., a black SUV pulled up to the curb in front of our house. Jackie. John ran out the front door. I followed him out on the porch into the blindingly bright afternoon. Jackie didn't hand the baby over, but waited for John to take her out of the car seat inside her vehicle. Liability reasons, I assumed. In John's hand, the baby looked small, like a delicate light brown doll, her face no bigger than his palm. All she had on was a pink onesie and the word baby embroidered in white across the chest. Despite my hesitations, a strong affection washed over me the moment I saw her, barely awake, helpless, innocent. John just melted. Eyes on the baby, breathlessly, he carried her into the house. Jackie looked a bit shaken. Jenna had confronted her in the parking lot, yelling, accusing her of betrayal. Jackie handed me the cooler bag with several bottles of formula and a 3-inch binder with medical information and placement papers. The baby and the bag. No baby blanket. Nothing else. Then she glanced at her watch and said, "I gotta go, guys. Trying to beat the rush hour." I thanked her. Jackie got back into her SUV and left. It was done. I found John inside in the hallway, standing still with the baby in his arms, awestruck. Keeping his eyes on her, he passed the infant to me. Then he picked up his car keys from the dining room table and headed out. And I knew he'll be back in a few minutes and not alone.
I love that. What made you decide to write this book? Because I absolutely loved the book. I felt like I was crying with you. I was frustrated with you when you got frustrated. I mean, I love the fact that you talk about how you're a multicultural family as well, because my family's a multicultural family. What made you decide to write it?
As we entered the process and really started to deal with the way the process is, with all kinds of unexpected, unusual, crazy things started to pop in. And I'm like, wow, I better keep track of this. And then as our process began to sort of become more and more complicated with no end in sight, I was like, okay, well, one day I'm going to write about this too. So I kept diaries. I kept all the faxes, court orders. I have a lot of home videos. So basically all the documents, and everything. I just put them in the box. Actually, with 3 boxes to be exact, in the garage. And I thought, okay, once we adopt the kids, then I'll write about it. Well, it took us years, as the book will tell you, with very, very uncertain, with a lot of uncertainty along the way. When we got to the end of the process, I couldn't face the boxes. I just couldn't. I was so I mean, I don't like to throw the word PTSD, around. I know it means a lot to people, but believe me, it was a very difficult experience. let's just
I can
leave
imagine.
it at that. And so it took me, and I'm like, I really need to get the story out, because people really don't know. They hear foster adoption, the adopted kids from the foster care, but what if things go wrong, as they do often enough? That was one part of it. And the other part of it is like, is I really wanted to introduce the public to what goes on in children's courts, because children's courts are basically closed off to those who are not parties to the court, so to the case. So they, people think, oh yeah, well, there's a children's court here in Los Angeles, right up there in the hills. Things are being taken care of. Well, you really have no idea, what's going on there behind closed doors. And I thought, I really should write about it, because I couldn't really find anything about it. So it took me 4 years until I was finally able to face the files, and I started to put together, kind of start going through them and think about how I could really construct a narrative out of that, what to keep and what to leave out, not in terms of the baby story, but in terms of my own life, because a lot of other things were happening too. But let's just focus on the story of the adoption.
And of course, I think you're probably, as a parent, you wanted to get permission from your girls to make sure it was okay to share their stories as well.
Well, our kids actually know the story very well. And as they were growing up, we were exposing them more and more to the facts, to the details. And it had to be age appropriate, because, you wouldn't tell a 5-year-old that you would tell a 15-year-old, clearly. So they knew the story very well. Both of them have read it. And the older one, who is, I mean, what I just read about was actually the curbside delivery of our younger child. When John heads out, he heads out to the daycare to pick up her older sister. So our older daughter, who was in foster care before we got her at age 1, had a very, very emotional reaction to it. She loved the book. She loved us. She posted all over Instagram about it. But it was also dredging up a lot of things which sort of lay dormant for many years. So I knew it was going to be an adjustment process for her to come to terms with it. But maybe there's also some healing in it, because some of the things that are there, need to be faced.
That is so true. Now, when I was reading your book, and the part that really struck me, there was several parts that struck me, but one of the things that struck me was the fact that you and your husband, I think I read it, that you guys were not allowed in like some of the court proceedings, that you kind of had to stand outside and wait for somebody to come out and tell you. Did I read that correctly?
We were excluded from the court proceedings because we were not party to the case. So in the courtroom, you would have birth parents, of course, the judge, birth parents, county counsel representing Department of Children and Family Services, and the children's attorney. And that's about it. That's all. And you have to realize, of all these people, only the birth parents would have actually met the kids. The judge will never meet the kids throughout the whole book, nor would the children's attorney, nor the county councils. Sometimes they would bring in social workers to testify, but the person representing the county would never actually meet the kids. And so for them, the kids are just, files,
Yeah.
Here's your child, right? So with reports from people who observe and report on the welfare to the court. And so we actually applied to get the de facto parent status on our older daughter after she had been with us longer than she was with her birth mother originally. And we hired a lawyer, went in, it cost us quite a bit, and we were thrown out within 3 minutes. The judge denied our motion, said it was unnecessary, and we were asked to leave the courtroom. So the second time we would actually step into the courtroom when we would come to the adoption proceedings.
I can't imagine not allowing the person that has the day-to-day with the child to come in and at least testify or something with the day-to-day.
What I see here, there's the whole foster adoption process has some really fundamental contradiction in it. Mm-hmm. Because on one hand, you're supposed to be the foster parent who's just taking care of the kids, making sure they're, well fed, clean, go to school and all that, and then be ready to give them up at any moment. Okay. However, if things don't work out with the birth family, you're supposed to switch like this into the adoptive parent mode, and be this forever committed, loving, raise them as my own, kind of parent. Well, except nothing really changes in our relationships with our babies from the time they came into the house till the time papers are finalized. Nothing changes in our human relations with the kids just because the judge 30 miles away ruled something in the case one way or another. So there is really no separation there. There's no separation because you get attached to the kids, unless you're really professionally fostering them. But in our case, we're fostering them to keep them, right? Mm-hmm. So with everything that, when we're told, this one's going to go there, and then as you'll read in the book, it's several times we almost lost our younger daughter, and one time it came so close I had to give notice at the daycare on Friday that Monday, the court will be moving her to her birth family, and Monday the court came, and the court date came, and the court case went in 180 degrees, completely different direction. There was absolutely no talk about removing her now, and then that's some other evidence came into light. So you live through this, but at the same time, like, who are you to these kids? Mm-hmm. Because in the eyes of the court, we were, to use a legal term, we were the basically non-related caregivers. Mm-hmm. We're non-related caregivers. So as such, we were really not part of the whole scenario. And the court was trying to build the birth family, or in this case, actually two birth families, because also the birth father, or one of them, was also very much present in this, which is, they had a vision of what they wanted this to be, right? Which is really pie in the sky. Like, whereas like in the real life, there is a family. That's us. We are with these kids day after day, month after month, year after year, around the clock. We are the only parents that our younger daughter actually knows, and the older daughter, assumes that that's who we are. Mm-hmm. And so, what about building us up? What about supporting us? What about beginning to weigh, the longer the kids stay with you, that the more you are the real family, because that's what it is. So that wasn't there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. I also thought you made a point of saying you had another friend that was a couple that actually adopted, and their adoption, foster to adopt, went through smoothly. And here you were wondering, why do I have to jump through all these hoops? So let's talk about, was there certain reasons why? I think in the turning point in the book, and I think in your life too, was when there was a change in personnel, and all of a sudden things got switched a little bit. So let's talk about that.
Well, it's the luck of the draw, as they say, because the family that I mentioned, they adopted 4 kids from the system. They've gone through 4 foster adoption cases, and all of them went through smoothly, and without any major delays or anything. So for some reason, that's so they had it easier than we did. Our story was kind of like at the other end of the spectrum. Although you read the book, ours is not the worst story. There's something even worse than what happened to us that I document in the book. Yep. It happened to some other families, and I did get permission from those families, from that particular family, to bring it into the book. So things can get worse. It's unpredictable. I should probably mention here that I am actually a person of faith. And we raised our kids in faith as well. And at some point, I began to realize that in a way, to have specifically these kids come into my life was sort of part of my path, and I'm just following the path. And even more than that, I realized that we were given to our older daughter, who had gone through so much while being a baby, exactly because we could provide her with a kind of stability and commitment that she badly needed. And so we were kind of sent to her. Sent to her to help. I mean, I really strongly feel it, because I think it would take, because a lot of people wouldn't be able to kind of deal with a lot of those things, and we were. It was hard, but we did. And so I feel like we we were given that mission to, specifically with her, not with a newborn, with the daughter. Now, you said there was a change in personnel. That makes a huge difference. With all these parties in court, the judge, the county, children's attorneys, birth parents, and here there are two separate birth parents, because each of them were, had their own case. Every person has their own agendas. I mean, every party to the case has their or its own agenda, biases, likes, dislikes, hatreds, potential litigation, and all of this comes in. So when something changes, it can make a huge difference. We saw that change with a social worker, the one that came on at the end. We felt was treating us very coldly. All of a sudden, once she realized who we were, a gay couple. Whereas the children's attorney, there was a change in that too, and that attorney sided very closely with us, and she felt that it was the best for the kids to stay with us no matter what. And so she fought very, very hard for those kids. So yeah, those personnel changes, as you say, make a difference.
I mean, when I was listening to it, because I had it on a Kindle, and I was listening as I was getting ready, and I stopped and had to re-listen to that part several times. I'm like, yay, finally. I knew you had adopted, but I didn't know the story. And I was like, yay, finally, somebody's willing to listen. One of the funniest parts in the book was when you and your husband go and you have to fill out the birth certificates for the kids for the adoption, and they only have one part for a father. So can you tell us about that?
You know, what I'll tell you is that literally 2 months ago, I had to take my older daughter to Social Security because she lost her card. She needed to file for the card replacement. So we went into the office here in Long Beach, and then we got called, and we come up to the window, and I was like, oh my God, I've been here before. Because nothing has changed until in 15 years, nothing has changed. It's the same office. The walls are just as grimy, the same Formica, counter. And it was exactly that window because it was the only one which had disabled access. I'm not disabled, but it was the one that got called in 15 years ago and now. And we come up to the window, and the person behind the counter says, I'd like you to state your Social Security number. And she did. And the name of your parents. And I said, before she says it, I said, I just want you to know they're actually, she has two dads, but one of us is written as a mother. She says, yes, are you? And then she read my name. Are you Lane Igoudin, the mother? I said, I am Lane Igoudin, the mother.
That's the case where paperwork has not caught up with the times.
Yeah. It was at that time, and we're talking about 2008, in the eyes of the federal government, we were still no one to each other, Jonathan and I. And at that point in 2008, we'd been together 11 years. And at this point, we've been together over 26 years. So we were able to get married in the state of California the same year in 2008. And then the marriage was, and then same-sex marriage was put on hold in California with the passing of a proposition. And so it remained, I kind of got frozen in a way, us and 18,000 other couples who, were able to get married during those 5 months of 2008. And then there was no same-sex marriage in California until it became legal, countrywide. So, it was during that time that we applied for Social Security, but yeah, it was basically father and mother and no other options. And either one of you be the mother or or would there be only one father then, one parent? Yeah. And I thought if this child will ever have a mother, okay, at this point, I'm as close as she's ever going to get.
But it also goes back to like, she actually started calling you something close
Mommy.
to mommy to begin with, right?
Mommy, because at some point, like, even though we continued to have visits with the birth mother until she was 4, with everything that went on, in the case, she continued to see her mother, but for some reason, she started calling other people mommy, and at some point, she started calling mommy in front of her mother, which I thought was, I did not want to traumatize her mother even more than she already has. Was like, sweetie, that's your mommy. I'm not your mommy. I'm your papa. You got papi and daddy. Papi and daddy. I'm papi. That's mommy right there. But I don't know why she was doing that, but it was, yeah.
Which she just made, she was foretelling what was going to come down the pike, what was going to come. You were going to be the mother on the birth certificate. Now let's talk about Babushka, your 84-year-old grandmother. I mean, she's a spitfire in this book. I mean, the fact that she would write like a whole bunch of editorials and send them in, and then like she could care less what other people thought. She
was our closest friend and ally in the family. She was a psychiatrist back in the Soviet Union, and she was very progressive, very liberal. And she became very supportive, and she would actually, she passed away, unfortunately, a few years later, but she was living in Northern California. So she would fly out with her walker to see us, right? And when we got married in 2008, and we stopped by to see her because we got married in San Francisco, we stopped by to see her on the way, and she was very happy to see us again and the kids. She was finishing a full spread. It became a full spread in this Russian newspaper editorial in support of gay marriage, and she knew it was going to cost her friends. The community is quite, was not, I would say pretty homophobic. Yeah. At least it was. I'm guessing it still is, and especially older people that she was part of that milieu, and she knew people. I saw the next issue. She mailed me a copy. I was like, oh my god. But she was fearless. If she knew something was right, she would stand up for it. And we were on the same page. And she gave me a lot of good advice over time. And she was very supportive. Yeah, I miss her terribly. You can tell the connection that even your husband had with her, because, immediately, like when she found out you were having the baby, she wanted to come down and help you out and do everything. You're like, no, you can't do this. Right. That baby will kill you. I told her. Yeah. Up all night, and the whole thing. Yeah. Now, you mentioned several times in this interview and also in the book about the foster care system. The point is to reunification, but there were extreme circumstances for your younger daughter. Like the father was actually older than the birth mother, and so they didn't even take that into account. I mean, he could have had criminal charges against him. The offense that which he how can I put it? I don't know if I can say allegedly committed, which is statutory rape. Of the difference between the mother being a teenager and the father being an adult. You do the math. And I'm saying alleged because it was alleged in the court, in the proceedings in court, which were filed. That offense was supposed to be really processed in the criminal court, not in children. It's not a children's court purview to deal with that, and they dealt with that. And the book describes exactly what happened when they went to the criminal court. And the thing is, of course, we all want kids to remain with the birth parents, and so do I. And the kind of, honestly, the kind of prospective adoptive kids that we're looking for, we're hoping would come with low risk, meaning that there's very little chance that they would go back to their birth parents, because basically their birth parents will be able to assume, parental responsibility and raise them as they should. That is, they are their kids. But I thought that the applying it sort of uniform to all cases is not kind of goes against reality, and that's what my book is documenting, which is basically you're trying to reunify something that is unreunifiable. You know, those kids. I mean, the birth mother. Okay, I'll give away a bit of a book that the birth mother is a teenager, right, without a family, who really cannot take care of herself, and you're trying to build her into being a functional parent. When she really needs to kind of figure out how she's going to live on her own and take care of herself, a functional parent of not just one, but two children, you know, and you're throwing all these resources and time, and at whose expense does this, you know, idea, you know, come at? It comes at the expense of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with the older one, the continuous trauma of her being with a person who couldn't take care of her and put her voluntarily in foster care, you know, and with the younger one, you know, us bringing her, and I document this all in the book, to meet with the birth parents who she doesn't know who these adults were, and she's afraid of them, and she wants to be with the people she knows as a parents, which is us and her sister. So it comes at the expense of, you know, emotional, psychological, but also long-term, risk for these kids. And it took me almost, I would say, 8 years to write the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the original draft was much longer. And what I took out of it was a lot of research that I did into the issues. I'm not a social studies scholar. And I kept some of it in the book. But the one thing that I found, that in Los Angeles County that very year when we started this process, only 45% of kids under reunification orders were able to reunify with their parents.
Wow.
Which is like, well, great. One of them was able to go back to their family. Well, that's great. What about the other one? Do you understand what the other one is being put through? And I think, you know, our narrative kind of tells you the costs.
The cost, for sure. What do your girls think? Do they know? They obviously know the whole story. They know about their mom. At one point in the book, you talk about how you were even open to having an open adoption where that the mom could still be a part of their lives. Is the mom a part of their lives now, or no?
Ours is a closed adoption.
Okay.
We went into the process with accepting the idea that it might be an open adoption, but the more things continue to develop, the less likely it became. Mm-hmm. So what it ended up being is a closed adoption. We've had our kids have had no contact with their birth parents. We haven't had them in our lives. I really hope things turned out well for them. That's you know, I really can't speak for them, but by the time what I do know is that by the time our court cases, because it was more than one, ended, both parents left the state, you know, for various reasons, and that's really all I know. Do they want to see them? That's a very good question. The older one had it was like at different times in her life. She's 19 now. Had come to that idea, and I said, you know, let's wait till you turn 18, because you're not the only person here, you know, because your younger sibling, you know, younger sister has no interest in seeing it whatsoever, and she doesn't want to, change anything in that. So let's wait till you're 18, and when you're 18, you know, you can go to the county and ask to see your case, you know, and then go from there. And as I mentioned, our younger daughter has absolutely no interest. If anything, over the years have been like, well, you know, I really need to tell you more. You know, we really need to know more. But like, no, you do. But from the moment that John took her out, you know, in the car seat out of the car, really outside of where I'm sitting, you know, brought her in the house, you know, and then he came back, she went straight on his chest. When she remained for the next, I would say, year.
I read that part.
You know, like this. You know, he's a tall guy, 6'3", you know, muscles and all. So she would be right here with her ear against his heart, and he would be watching TV. You know, putting dishes in the dishwasher. You know, we would put her down for her, you know, nighttime, all this, but she would always be with him. And when she was little, right here, really on this carpet, we put like a little rug for her, put her down. She at the time she couldn't even lift her head and move her head. So he would lie down next to her, and she would be looking at him, and he would be looking at her. The connection between the two of them, as what my sister used to say, it's like it's like a second umbilical cord. To this day, we're all very attached, we're all very bonded. But I'm telling you, it's nothing like him and her.
That definitely came across in the book.
Yeah.
So do you think that you had to jump through more hoops because you were a gay couple?
As far as the county, it's like the county process, our cases and all that, no. Except with the second social work where I felt that we really felt, and there were some things that she did, and I would say, withheld from the court and all that. That she was trying at the last minute to sort of turn things around, and she, we felt very strongly she was homophobic. That's how we felt. Okay, and that's kind of a feeling that you get it. It's not like it's like it's there. A person of color can tell you when they feel this sort of like, covered racism when nothing is said, but everything is sort of done, and then there's this attitude that comes through. We felt that, but that was really with one person. But we were treated differently by not by the county, but by the government. We ended up adopting 2 kids as single men. Like literally in the eyes of the federal government, who somehow adopted 2 sisters who were related. Like, the whole setup was kind of crazy. Later on, we were asked to testify, and we did. We submitted a written testimony to the Judiciary Committee of the Senate when the first bill to get rid of the Defense of Marriage Act, which wouldn't allow same-sex marriage in the country, was introduced by our Senator Dianne Feinstein. So we were contacted, and we testified there, and then we submitted our testimonies in the court cases where they're trying to allow agencies not to qualify potential gay and lesbian parents. So we were active. We marched and we did all that. We did all that because we believe that we deserve the same rights as everyone else. And I think honestly, politically, people can be in different places. But I think if we really begin with the idea that what's best for the children, what do you think is best for the children, hundreds of thousands of them still, who need a home in this country? To be stuck in foster care, group homes, being shifted, like bounced from one home to the next, or have a permanent family. And I believe, and I think most people would agree that it's, they need to have a committed forever family. And all it takes is a functioning adult. It could be a single adult, it could be a married adult, it could be a heterosexual adult, it could be a homosexual adult. But a functioning adult who is able to provide the care, the home, and take care of their needs. Could be, by the way, a grandmother or a distant relative, a functioning adult. So all this picking and choosing who we want to be those adults when kids are basically without families, I think is done at the kid's expense.
I totally agree. And a lot of people, they were like, I always think about the children. And back before the same-sex marriage was passed, children, like you said, only had one thing, a birth father. If it was two gay men, only one birth father, and they couldn't have the birth mother. They wouldn't actually fill in the blank like the lady that did yours filled you in as the birth mother. And what would happen is one of the adopted parents passed away, but legally the other adopted parent wasn't
all
on
kinds
the
of
birth.
issues.
And that was like, where's the kid going to go when it caused all these things? And I'm like, where's the best interest of the child? These are the only parents the child has ever known.
Yes, for the sake of what exactly? For the sake of somebody's hatred of or lack of acceptance, because we don't have problems with who we are. Other people might view us differently. So it's not something that's, At the time we went into the process, it was a minority of states that would actually allow gay men and gay couples to foster kids. We were lucky to live in one of those states, but there are other states where you would actually, which would expressly not allow. And as the time went on, as the battle over, family equality, equal rights kind of got, more and more, difficult. Then the more states actually passed those laws. In some states, if you cross the state line, you would lose your parental rights, or one of you would have to lose. It's like it was all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm talking about like late 1990s and early 2000s. Mm-hmm. So we were at this point right now. We live in a country where by and large, we all have the equal access, but mm-hmm. all of that can change. Yep. All that can change, and some other freedoms have been rolled back recently, and so the freedom to marry, the freedom to be qualified as an adoptive parent can also be taken away. I mean, and very quickly.
It's so sad to me. So sad. Now, in your book, you mentioned a support group. Can you talk about that support group and how much that support group meant to you?
Well, there was a formal group of us, gay dads in Los Angeles, which still exists. It was called the Potluck, the Potluck Club. So basically, everybody would bring a dish and get together. Kids would be out playing in the playground. We'd be talking about our issues, crying on each other's shoulder, exchanging tips, and things like that. So it was a very nice and welcoming group, and it was actually quite large. Several hundred, families led by gay men, and there were some other organizations at the time, and that are still around. Like Family Equality is one of them, which is a nationwide advocacy for LGBTQ families. That aside, those were, I would say, just more like meetings, like once a month. Because it was only Jonathan and me. His parents passed away. His family lives in a different part of the state. My parents live in the Bay Area. We're here in Los Angeles, and it was just the two of us. So we had to figure out how to do everything really on our own. And so we developed a very nice, supporting network, a village, if you will, mm-hmm. of friends and other parents, I would say with kids of roughly about the same age, gay, straight, single, couple, mostly here in the neighborhood. And so, and our kids grew up with their kids. And so, it's to this day, we're all friends and we're in touch. So that's very important. That's very important to have that kind of a supportive network.
For sure. Now, our time is almost up. Before we talk about where people can find you at and where they can find the book, is there one last little, maybe something we touched on that you want to make sure that it came across, or something that we didn't touch on that you want to share? Just kind of leave us with the last little nugget.
The story that I'm telling you might make it look like the task of adopting a child from foster care is very daunting. And I'm definitely describing a situation, a kind of a drama that goes on and on and on. But I'd like to reiterate, it's not everybody's story. It just, things happen that way to us, but it doesn't have to be that way. But I would say that I wouldn't want anyone to be discouraged by considering adopting a child from foster care, and those children need you. Things have changed. Things haven't changed much. Things have not gotten much better, and I read about this. I read about new kinds of difficulties that their kids are facing. So we're still pretty much in the same situation as we were 15 years ago when we were going through our story. So there are kids that are waiting for you, and I would really like to encourage you, if you have an opportunity to foster a child, or better, foster adopt a child, you should seriously consider it. And if you have any questions, reach out to me by all means. I can tell you where you can find me.
Go right ahead.
I have a website, which is laneigoudin.com. Thank you for projecting it, laneigoudin.com. Or you can also email me at laneigoudin@gmail.com. gmail.com, or I'm also active on social media on Instagram and Facebook, so you can find me there as well. And I'll be happy to hear from you.
Yes, because I think your story is one that it opened my eyes a lot to what goes on, because I have friends who actually foster to adopt, but I never realized what they went through, because they were like acquaintances, not really close friends, but I never realized the hoops that you have to jump through as a foster parent.
Yeah. Well, I really hope that if any of you listeners undertake that journey, it'll be an easy one for them.
Yeah. Lane, thank you so much for coming on, for writing your book, for sharing your family with us in this book, for sharing your struggles, everything. There's a lot of struggles that we didn't touch on our interview that you can go and read in the book, but it's a heartwarming book. And I was rooting for you all the way until I found out when that flip happened. I'm like, yes, finally somebody is listening to them. Yes. I mean, I can't imagine what you were going through in your mind when all that stuff was going on, because you've had to have multiple, at one point you had to get on medication because it was just taking so much out of you.
True. Thank you so much, Melissa. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
All right, guys, I will put in the show notes everywhere where you can find Lane's book, A Family Maybe, where you can contact Lane, as well as he said, if you want to email him, I'll put his email address down too. That way, if you have questions about the foster to adopt, right there with you. So Lane, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, guys, see you on the next chat from the Blog Cabin. Bye.